Today I'm going to talk about some Jewish perspectives on feminism and not really feminism, but more about like gender issues. And a lot of people have problems with the way that women are depicted, or they think that women are treated within the religion, and especially more like religious practices. And it's funny because they think that women are really marginalized, but it actually turns out very much more often that women turn out to have a greater role and are given sort of not necessarily greater responsibility, but like a bigger like more credit, and are considered to be higher spiritually to begin with. That's just like the basics of sort of the idea. I have to open up here the notes that I took yesterday in class. So basically, the opening of this class was, well, what's the definition of feminism? And people said, or yeah, what would you, how would you define feminism? And people said the right for women to have equal rights and able to do whatever they want within within reason, the same as any other gender. And I think that that's a good concept, but I think that sometimes people take it too far and they get really confused about what gender roles are and what is appropriate for different people. Like, humans are made differently. Women have a womb. Women don't have the same potential for, or at least not naturally the same potential for muscle mass. And they're just very simple things that, like, why get offended that you can't lift like 50 pounds as easily as a man and like go work out like every day instead of like paying attention to your kids and like making your husband do it, who is technically not as psychologically prepared to do that job, when you could just switch places and like nothing's going to be lost. Realize that a lot of people take issue with this, and it's like really super like seems traditional and all of that. But I think with this, and I used to feel the same way, it's really important to open yourself to the possibilities of different ideas of what we really think gender roles are and what feminism can be. My definition of feminism has become more along these lines. Feminism, or masculinism, whatever ism you want to talk about, is the practice of celebrating the greatest potential of a person's being, whatever gender they may be. So for a woman, it's the practice of celebrating the greatest potential of the feminine. So celebrating having a beautiful body, having the ability to nurture physically, biologically, which is said your physical and how you manifest and how you like display yourself, the jewelry you wear, the colors, and how you express yourself is ultimately a reflection of the interior, which is talked about in a lot of different spiritual practices. This is not, and most of the things that I talk about are not exclusively Jewish. A lot of Jewish thought I'm learning, are things that are talked about in many like new age-ish theories and practices, and they just have their own bent on them, and the idea that a Jew is the physical manifestation of a Jewish soul that comes down to earth and has to live out its life, hopefully, with some knowledge of Torah, and ideally with a lot of knowledge of Torah, and living to their greatest potential within the parameters of I want to say its values, but it sounds like that's really confining. But really, you're supposed to first have a job and then study Torah. So like really, you're supposed to have your own life, and then you use the Torah to tell you how to live that life, and like the blueprints for what a good way for a Jew to fulfill themselves spiritually. So people don't like that distinction either, that like a Jewish soul is different from any other soul. And I don't know, it's hard to say. I don't know how I feel about that, or I've talked about this before, saying that, it's not so simple to just say, oh yeah, well, we're fundamentally different in this and such way. And there have been a lot of really interesting stories of like, people who go to mikvah and they like feel something like drop into them, that after they convert, that in that moment when they come up out of mikvah, the like holy bath that they take, you take steps, you say prayers, and then and this is all after like months of studying, taking really hard tests. It's more than months, it takes years. And in any case, mikvah, I guess I'll make this related. Mikvah is also one of the greatest mitzvahs for a woman to do, because it's purifying, and it's sort of like a symbolic reminder of her potential as a nurturer, because the mikvah is supposed to be like a womb, and like when you come out of it, you're reborn, and like you're pure and innocent like a baby again, in some ways at least. So yeah, I think all of these concepts are really cool, and just the idea of them, if for nothing more than like ritual practice. Like there are a lot of different practices that involve ritual. Like your everyday routines are often rituals that are nothing more than psychological constructs that make you comfortable because somebody has told you that for some reason or another that way of doing things is ideal. Brushing your teeth. Well, some people don't brush their teeth. They use oil pulling. They use Listerine, they eat an apple, all different kinds of things. And I mean, if not with like toothpaste, maybe non-fluoridated toothpaste, or maybe some kind of oil or an extract from a plant, because they don't live somewhere that people make toothpaste. The whole idea of this industrialized world that we live in and all of this different stuff is just as ritualistic and just as religious as a lot of people want to say religions are. And these practices are useful for not just for their own end, but so that people can have a way of feeling connected to something, and like they have an obligation, not just to themselves or to their family, but to the greater good in the world. And ultimately, when you say like your obligation to God, it means your obligation to the world that you live in, and that is, and the dependency that world has on you. So that's like the basis for basically this whole talk. So let's see. In this case, that women are different than men, and men have different obligations. That they have to wear a kippah, they have to wear a tzitzit, which a kippah is basically like a reminder that here God is above you, and stay humble. And somebody who wears their kippah all the time it's like more righteous act. And same with tzitzit, it's an action showing that you are aware of all of these truths. And they're things that are sort of like, it's not like you could say, well, you're just making that up, that doesn't make sense scientifically, or that doesn't make sense such and such. It's all of these things are compatible with other ideologies other than like idolatry and certain stuff, but with like the new world and the way that we live today. Really, it's not so incompatible with life that you can really take too much issue with it. So yeah, wearing tzitzit, wearing the yarmulke. The tzitzit are like, it's like garments you wear under clothes, a man wears, and has then like the strings that hang down. A lot of people have seen them. They're like tied in like kind of like Chinese staircase look. Like kids used to make bracelets with that. I don't know, friendship bracelets. So that's a mitzvah for a man, because men have to do more of these like physical world things, more specific rules for prayer, like the oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Like the when they have to have 10 people come together. Because men aren't as trustworthy as women. That's one of the things that we talked about here, that women are more trustworthy, and they have like basically they have run of the house and they have to take care of all of these things, like, making the food a lot of the time. You don't come into a house and ask a man as often as you ask a woman, what's the hechsher on this, like the kosher certification, that's what hechsher is. How did you make your challah? What is all this stuff? You ask the woman because it's the woman's, not duty. They call it that, but a better way of putting it is that it's the responsibility bestowed upon the woman because she has the more innate ability and is more willing, like psychologically more loyal, that she's going to do it right and that she's not going to get bored and say, oh, no, I don't want to do this. She says, no, you know what? I understand this. I get it. There is a greater good out there that needs us or wants us to do certain things, or that it will be better if we do certain things certain ways, and I can take care of it. I don't need a man to take care of this or do this. And the idea of what's it called? When the man and woman have like equal, say in whatever roles in like within the home is like a nice idea, but I think it can be confusing. I think it can be confusing for children because then sometimes, I don't know, I think that it's a problem when women start to say, oh, but like men do all of this stuff and they shouldn't make more money than a woman in the same job. I totally don't think that that's okay. But I do think that people get like hypersensitive about like, oh, why are men so active in these jobs and women have nursing jobs? And do you ever stop to think that maybe it has something to do with human nature and that that's a nurturing job and that men are really good at teaching because they can explain things through and they're very like, the masculine is more about like putting things in order and making sense out of it, and like it's a little bit mundane. It's kind of dry actually, and that there's something much more holy and something, not much more, but like at least slightly more like special spiritually about the innate understanding that a woman has emotionally in the connection to children that are very young, because she carried one in her body for 9 months before it was born. Could have something to do with that. I'm not saying that men don't have connections with their children, because I think their role and their connections are really important. Not having a father can like totally mess up a child's later life. But early childhood, like I'm all about stay-at-home moms, and I'm all about paying lots of attention to your kid and having a good relationship with them. I myself had like a really interesting childhood with like not the most stable parental situation until I was like 3, and then in between, I had 2 parents, but after that, not. And you can tell that it makes a difference in how a person is able to interact with the world. So having a stable mother figure and one who is aware of the emotional needs of a child, which comes from, and when I say spiritual, I'm not like talking about like this hokey pokey sent from the energies above or whatever. People like to get confused and knock things because they're abstract, but really it's just like a softer way of saying emotional, psychological understanding that doesn't necessarily have to have this like whole broken down, like thought out, scientific argument behind it, because that starts to miss the point. We talked about this the other day in our Chassidus class, actually, that breaking things down so scientifically and so like logically leaves out the potential and leaves out the room for the idea that when you have an idea or you have an emotion or something going on, it's not just like, oh, yeah, this happened, this is my chemical response to it based on exterior stimuli. There has to be something that somewhere between that external stimuli and you is putting in that information. What is that connection? It's not just like, oh, I saw something, this is my physical reaction. That thing did not touch me. It didn't it didn't have a physical interaction with anything within me that would make some cascading reaction into, a traumatic event or into depression or into some reaction, that's where things get sticky, and scientists and whoever wants to talk about it, mathematicians, can't really explain away the fact that when you have an experience, something is coming evidently from outside of you into you, from which point, and in my neuroscience class we discussed this too, about consciousness, that it seems like something is coming from outside, or that it's like in this less easily measured aspect, that we have to just trust it, and maybe down the road we'll have better measuring tools for understanding, but right now we don't. And so I think that we have to be open to the idea that we don't necessarily have all the answers, and maybe there's this invisible field of interaction going on between things. That's the part where something comes down in, and then you have this chemical reaction and all that based on this interaction that is fundamentally spiritual, but being manifest in the physical, and then you have your effect on the other person. So that's actually the biggest part of it, is that if you ignore your effect on the other person, then you're ignoring your responsibility towards them. And if you have love for somebody or something, then usually they say that you will do what's right, and you will go outside of yourself and try to grow if that's what it takes for the better of those around you and the people that you really truly love. And so that's what this is getting at, that if even if you don't fully get it, and maybe it doesn't completely make sense, you have to keep trying to make sense of it. And I don't know, this sounds like, oh, it's so manipulative, and how can you tell somebody this kind of stuff, but really I don't think it's so unreasonable. So then there are some interesting ideas about what Jewish law dictates. This is what I'm saying, though, is that we're physically different. Why should we be treated the same? So, for instance, a Cohen can't marry a divorced woman. A Cohen is a more highly religious priest of the ancient days. They were the priests in the Jewish practice, and they're said to be really super pure and really important for the community to have around. So, and marrying a woman who's been divorced psychologically is going to be more difficult, because she has this whole other family maybe behind her, and this whole other story in life, and all of that can be worked through and dealt with. But I guess apparently for a Cohen it's more important that they're starting from scratch with somebody who doesn't have that experience. It might also have to do with virginity, I don't know. So we talked about, this isn't just about feminism or femininity. This is really, this class was about, what was it called? Inside the Jewish home, keeping a Jewish household. So, and that means marriage and all of this other stuff. So basically, they say that God creates one soul and splits it into man and woman when they come down to earth, and they can spend 20 or 30 years doing other things with their life, and then looking for a soulmate, looking for their soulmate, and then maybe finding them through a matchmaker or through their experiences or where they go or what they do or whatever. And eventually they find this person that they're going to be with for the rest of their life, hopefully, and get to spend their life together. So that's a reunion of the 10, or of the 2. The next thing that is 10, the meaning of the 10 men that I was trying to think of is minyan. Prayer between men has to happen with 10 of them, because they're not spiritually high or honest enough, which is what the Jewish not law, but the Jewish belief says. And this is all Hasidic. I don't know how much of this is really I've kind of gotten out of touch with more reform practice or even conservative. I practice more on that end, but I'm more educated now on like the Hasidic side because that's just who I've been spending a lot of time with. So in any case, then they say that there are 10 powers of speech attributed to the world, and 9 of them are attributed to women. So it has to do with the fact that women are able to speak more truth, and they have this intuition, and they have like this spiritual side that is able to be manifest like verbally, sometimes in a better way. Even though like obviously a lot of men are really good speakers and they speak and whatever. I think that's also probably has something to do with the idea about that a man is supposed to, or a husband is supposed to take seriously the counsel of his wife, which means that if she has advice for him or suggestion, or she wants him to change somehow, he is obligated to like seriously consider it, to really look at it. So that's a really amazing way in which like women are respected. So we talked about the different tools, different abilities, and different expectations of men and women, physically and spiritually, psychologically. I mean, if you think about it, so women, in my class on psychology when I was in Spain a couple years ago, my professor made a really funny analogy. It was that women, inside of their minds, they have a web. They have like... I always forget how to translate this talk back into English. They have like a network of different ideas and concepts and people and thoughts and facts and whatever going on in their mind, that they're able to go from one to the other to another and like make connections between them. And this is actually makes sense because they see things on sort of more of this scale that is not so black and white. It's more like a spectrum. And when you go out into the world and like you're navigating, for example, that's useful when you are trying to figure something out based on where you are right now, like where do I make the next turn? How do I do things relatively? That's what women are good at. And I mean, this is like proved with neurobiology, like neuroscience. This isn't like religious stuff now. But it relates, and this is how I build my paradigm, is based on scientific and religious, practical knowledge that I learn, and sort of trying to fuse them and make sense of, what really seems to be going on here. Not that I really claim to have any clue, because all of this could be completely wrong. But I don't know, it seems to work for a lot of people. So that's why I'm talking about it. And in any case, and so then for men, they have cajas, they have boxes. So men have like a box, you can open one at a time, he sees something inside, he's able to think about that paradigm, that issue, that person, and they can make connections and whatever, but it's a little bit harder for them to sometimes maybe make the connection between like, oh, my girlfriend is like implying something, she made this comment. They're not quite as intuitive to tell themselves, oh, she's telling me she wants me to do this. Like, yes, people should be straightforward, and it's just a lot easier when we're like 100% honest and like real with each other. But at the same time, a woman more often will think to herself, does this mean something more? Is there something else going on? It can become neurotic. These things can all end up on any end of like whatever spectrum you're looking at, and it can become really extreme, or it can, it can just be like a fact of life. And so a man, can open like one caja at a time, like one box, or like maybe connects 2 of them, or like consolidate. And I think that's just an interesting thought, because it's how things are really figured out. And in relation to the navigation, for men, they're much better at making like set directions. First you make a right here, then a left on that street, keep going straight around the turnstile or whatever you call it, and then you keep going, make a right. They can remember like directions, and that's a masculine trait, or what's considered a masculine trait. And I have one of my best friends who's a girl, is better at that kind of navigation than anybody I've ever met in my life. So, but that's that's part of her masculinity. I have certain masculine traits. Many men have many feminine traits. So, again, this is all about spectrum. This is not about like extremism or like one or the other or whatever, but it's about celebrating, accepting, and understanding, first off, and then acting on those realities, and maybe just taking a look and thinking to yourself, like, I don't know, is this possible? Is it maybe true that, or even just observing and like see for yourself. I don't like to preach really so much. So then there were a bunch of interesting things about, let's see, um, about how when God made Adam and Eve, how so first the idea that Adam is made from the dust, and he goes around and looks at all the animals, and he names all of them based on their essence, what they're like, how they treat humans, how they interact, and then names them, right? Sorry, I'm just listening to my friend on the phone in the other room. So like Kelev, which is a dog, is of the heart. So Lev means heart in Hebrew, and for somebody to make a name of a dog like that is like so relevant, because that's what a dog is. A dog is like the heart of like your family. When you have a dog that's like so loving and it's like willing to give you its heart. So I thought that was cool. That's like an interesting idea. Then again, I don't know that dogs existed so long ago. Maybe it meant like wolves, or actually no, dogs have existed for like thousands of years. I don't know why somebody came up with that point, but I like that point, and just even the sheer fact that's the root of the word Kelev. It's cool. So anyhow, so Adam named all of these animals, and he found no partner because he noticed that all of the other animals had partners. We're always two together, and they mated, and they had children. They stayed together, kind of, more or less, sort of, whatever. And actually, in Judaism, it's not always been true that men and women are monogamous. It was that men could have multiple wives back in the day, but that was changed and has been like entirely. That's not even, I think most people aren't even aware of that these days. But yeah, so he said to God, he was like, well, I'm lonely and I'm bored, and everybody else seems to have a mate. Where's mine? And so Adam was like really good looking, like the ultimate man. And this is all like, I guess because he was like the prototype. They say that the average of like a composite of like the more faces, the more good looking it's going to be. So like it's interesting, the idea that he was the composite of like, or like that he was the basis for all people like that exist now, because since he was the father of all people, and metaphorically or physically or like actually literally, who knows, like I don't purport to know or have super deep opinion on, again, these topics. But so this is where God makes Eve. She takes her from his rib, and he like fixes her up all nice and puts her in some like beautiful jewelry and does her hair, and she has like basically a bunch of hippie stuff going on, braids and like leaves and flowers. And the next morning, Adam rolls over, and actually, I guess it's that Hashem puts him into a deep sleep and like anesthetizes him, because it's gonna take a while to take a piece of your body and make you into a half a woman. Anyhow, he wakes up and rolls over the next morning, and he's like, oh my goodness, like I asked for it and I got this beautiful answer, and it's so amazing. And so that's like supposed to sort of be the excitement behind the marriage of a man and a woman, that a man is so taken by his wife, and that's why there's this idea that women are supposed to like make themselves beautiful. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, like religious people want to be ugly because they don't want to attract too much attention, and they don't want to like have attention of people outside of them. And I mean, maybe that's true of like the drier and less spiritual areas of Judaism. I don't really know, because I'm not really informed about that. Maybe I should be, but whatever. It doesn't seem to be the case. But women are supposed to make themselves beautiful so that their husband will mate with them, so that they can have babies. And this is like basically, like, especially in times of war, when, like, a man is really tired and he comes home and he doesn't want to, like, do the mitzvah of, like, being together with his wife. This is another thing. It's, like, just keeps carrying me through. So a lot of people are also really confused and concerned about the idea that, like, sexuality is so evil and it's considered to be so, impure and, like, bad. And really, it's completely the opposite in Judaism. It's like a huge mitzvah to make love. It's a really big deal, and it's supposed to be really sacred and, like, really beautiful for a man and a woman to be together, especially on Shabbos, like, after, like, the whole long week, to, like, celebrate being together and to become one again and celebrate what they've accomplished in that past week. So that's, like, a really important aspect of, like, Hasidus and spiritual Judaism and Kabbalah in general, is, like, the unification of masculine and feminine. And I think that's really special. Like, and instead of, like, degrading it and, like, commercializing it and, like, overexposing it, it's, like, this really careful, like, sort of not game, but, like, dance around each other and around understanding and really feeling and connecting on, like, a deeper level. And if you're just, like, indulging in physical acts, you can't accept and you can't appreciate that as much. And then you're going to become defensive because you're going to say, oh, well, you're telling me I did something wrong. I can't live by your morals, blah, blah, blah. And I can see why, and have been, like, really defensive in that right. But, hi, Adi, the BFF on this program just walked in. She's, like, another one of me. She's awesome. But, so anyhow, I think all that is really interesting and things to consider. What else? Another thing is that men are obligated to be married. I'm talking about our class from last night. I thought it was really cool, so I'm making a video about it. Men are obligated to be married, but women don't have to. Basically because, like, women want to be married, and men, like, can have children and be like, oh, well, you're not going to know who the mother is, so what does it matter? Actually, I don't know if it has anything to do with that. I actually was curious about it. But also men are obliged to have children, but they need a woman for that. So, what's up with that? I guess we'll find out. We're going to have, like, part 2 of that class sometime soon. And then, let's see, the women are supposed to, they have the ability to have children, and they have, like, the 3 mitzvot of, what were they? Nida is mikvah, right? Challah, which is, like, making the challah on Shabbos. Which is, like, supposed to be sustenance and another symbol of, like, nurture. And then halakat nirot, which is lighting the Shabbos candles.
Yeah, wasn't it Torah, something like Mary Torah?
I think that's for everyone. These doors are so creepy in this building. They just, like, slam shut constantly. Like, the wind is always coming through because, like, the doors are really light, and then the windows are, like, all open. And yeah, it's, like, constant. It's like, is there a ghost? Oh no, we're just at my note. Like, so anyhow, I don't know. I think that something to ponder perhaps in closing is that we have survived as people for thousands of years because we have, like, all of this stuff going on. We have all of these sort of, like, laws and these ideas, and even if, like, people become very secular and, like, really, like, in the mainstream, at least, like, we still have a lot of traditions of certain ways of keeping a home and of keeping each other informed, staying together, and most, or if not all, of the other peoples that I can think of and empires that have fallen, that have been exiled or whatever throughout history, it seems they've all dissipated into nothing. And still Judaism, like, shines really bright in the world and has a huge impact. Jewish people, Yiddishkeit in general, I mean, the Bible and Quran were both kind of written based on it, so, or maybe as amendments to it, as many will say. So I think there's something to be said for, like, the truth that at least can come of it if you look at it the right way. You can even look at it modernly, which I think is cool. So, in any case, that's all for now.